Today we will learn about the structure and function of the nervous tissues. Especially the nervous tissues do have the structures, and we will see what are all the different type of nervous tissues. So nerve tissue is consisting of a typical neuron, unlike the other tissues like the dendrites, nucleus, axon, myelin sheath, Schwann cells, noda primor, axon terminals, and many more types. So the nerve tissue is also, we have to study the histology, and neurons are the true conducting cells in a nervous tissue. And neurological cells do contain the astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, ependymal cells. So the nervous system is defined as the central processing unit of a computer which processes the master controlling system of the body, and it's designed to constantly and rapidly adjust, and it is having the control over entire body. Nothing more than that, it is also going to control the actions of the body, and it's consisting of two divisions: central nervous system, brain and spinal cord; peripheral nervous system, the spinal cord, the cranial nerves, and also the cranial nerves. So the properties of a neuron are it is an excitable ability to respond to environmental changes and stimuli, and it's having the conductivity to respond to stimuli by initiating electrical signs that travel quickly to other cells as distant locations. And the secretions upon arrival of the impulses at a distant location, the neuron usually secretes a chemical neurotransmitter at synapse that crosses the synaptic graph, and that stimulates the next cell. So this is a structure of a neuron, whereas the dendrites are the branch-like cells and axons are one which receive the stimulus. So the function of the neurons are always sensory, means afferent, means they carry the impulses from different parts of the body and supply it to the brain, then the brain processes and it is converted as the motor reflex. And there are certain neurons called as the interneurons, and they will be in between. They receive signals from many different neurons and perform an integrative function of decision making to respond to different stimuli. And motor are also known as efferent, means toward the organ, or they are going to direct the organ to do something in response to the sensory stimuli and process. And especially they are supplied to the muscle, glands, and all voluntary type of the tissues. For example, the functional classification of neurons is afferent and efferent, or sensory or motor. So whenever there is a stimuli like the pain or etc. something, they are carried from the axon to the motor neuron, and in the spinal cord it is processed, and a motor stimuli is carried out to the effector organ, especially to respond to that particular stimuli. Then the organization of the nervous system, two main divisions: the central nervous system, consisting of the nucleus, then tract. It consists mainly brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system consists of the lot of ganglia are there: paravertebral ganglia, prevertebral ganglia, cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and peripheral receptors. So, the ganglia is a collection of nerves, cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system, and nerve, the bundle of nerves in the peripheral nervous system. Then, organization of the nervous system is starting from the brain to the spinal cord. Whereas the peripheral nervous system is usually always its autonomic nervous system, which consists of the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is the one which do contain the epinephrine neurotransmitter, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system is having the acetylcholine as a specific neurotransmitter. So both of these are sensory and motor nerves are somatic nerves. Soma means body, and they are also called as the voluntary nerves. So it's a admixture of both sympathetic, parasympathetic, and the autonomic nervous system. So the functional divisions of the nervous systems are classified into central nervous system and PNS, which contain the brain and spinal cord and nerves and ganglia respectively. Whereas the sensory division is afferent, means it always feels the sensation of the animal and transmits that sensation, or just like the pain or warm or whatever it may be, to the central nervous system, which may be processed at the level of the spinal cord or at the level of the brain itself and sends a efferent stimuli, means motor stimuli, to the responding organ, especially to the skeletal muscle, to react to that situation. And it is transmits inputs from the viscera to the brain also, which is also called as the visceral sensory and somatic sensory, etc. So the neurons motor division is also consisting of the somatic motor or somatic nervous system, SNS, or autonomic motor system, or ANS, and some ANS and PNS components are admixed together and consists of all axons that transmit a nerve impulse from the central nervous system to a muscle or gland, or they make an output information and voluntary control of the skeletal muscles and involuntary control of smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands especially. Then the central nervous system is consisting of a vast type of the brain and spinal cord. You can see it in the sagittal plane, like the cross section of a brain, and you can see the sulci, gyri, midbrain, then the medial aperture, then cerebral cortex, cerebellum, this is the cerebellum, then cerebral abducens, then also the pituitary glands, so the third ventricle, then arachnoid villi. So it's a complex structures to the visualization, which is followed by the spinal cord. Elongated part of the brain is also called as the spinal cord, and the spinal cord is starting from the skull to the tail. So that's called as the entire central nervous system. So brain and spinal cord makes the central nervous system control the entire function of the body of the any animal or any living creature or a mammal, or the brain and spinal cord do control or master of entire body, which controls all the reactions of the animal. So the peripheral nervous system is supporting to the central nervous system, and it is also called as the involuntary nervous system. So the involuntary nervous system may be classified into the autonomic nervous system and sometimes the enteric nervous system. Of course, it is not a different type of the nervous system, but within the nervous system only, the gut is supplied with both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Whereas the somatic nerves, peripheral nerves, some nerves directly originate from the brain or the spinal cord and supplied to the skeletal muscles, and they are called as the somatic nervous system, which can be controlled by the animal, means the movement of a skeletal muscle or a hind limb or the leg or any other thing, it can be controlled, and as per the movement, etc., it can be controlled by the animal itself, and hence they are called as the peripheral nervous system. Whereas the sensory or afferent division is always, it is present in somatic sensory, then visceral sensory. Means whenever an animal or anybody try the feels the pain, pressure, etc., maybe it is from touch, pressure, pain, temperature, vibration, then proprioception through the skin, body wall, and lips. So the person or the animal can directly react it to sense of touch, etc., by reacting by the voluntary nervous system, whereas the visceral sensory is from autonomic sensory division and senses stretch, pain, temperature, chemical changes, and irritation in viscera, nausea, and also hunger, etc. So, this is not under the control of the individual human being or animal being, and it is the viscera, but the response has to be done from the individual itself through the different nervous system or providing the food, etc. So the motor or efferent division is totally under the control of somatic motor or the skeletal muscles except the pharyngeal muscles. So most of the time pharyngeal muscles may be cannot be exactly classified under the motor nerves or voluntary nerves. So, visceral motor nerves, autonomic nervous system, and sensory receptor convey information from visceral organs. Example: the heartbeats, the lungs, the intestine movement, then the digestion, the secretion of certain enzymes, etc., are not under the control of any animal, but they are self-controlled by a special type of the nervous system, and it's called as the involuntary nervous system. So it is also once again divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic division. Then the sympathetic division is always meant for fight or flight, means to face the situation or run away from the situation. Whereas the parasympathetic nervous system, it is a conservative type of the nervous system, and it is always related to the food or sex desire of the animal. Then here it's once again a diagrammatic representation of functional organization of the uh, nervous system, like the sensory or afferent division. As already explained, it transmits the information from periphery to the central nervous system and contains the receptors. Motor efferent division transmits information from CNS to the rest of the body. So the somatic sensory, then visceral sensory. So the somatic sensory is receiving the sensory information from all the external organs like the skin, the superficial fascia, joints, skeletal muscle, then special sense. Whereas the visceral is from the viscera or gut, whereas the motor efferent means the motor nerves or the response from the central nervous system is voluntary sometimes and involuntary. So the secretions of the body, muscle of the contractions of the gut, the cardiac rates are not under the control of the individuals. So they are called as the involuntary, whereas voluntary is under the control of the individual system. And structural classifications of the neurons are multipolar, bipolar, or unipolar, depending upon the cell body location. So this is the multipolar neurons, multiple type of the number of processes attached to the cell body is concerned like this. Then the neurons are the basic structure of the nervous systems, and 99% of neurons are multipolar in nature, and bipolar neurons are rare and occur in special cells of the organs ear, nose, and eye. So unipolar neurons begin at bipolar but process fuse into one, and they are primary sensory neurons, especially the dorsal root ganglia. So what's a dorsal root ganglia? It is the entry of the nerves inside the spinal cord. So the neuroglia cells found in central nervous system and peripheral nervous system and performing supporting to the neurons. So they are also containing the oligodendrocytes, astrocytes, then ependymal cells and microglia. Whereas the peripheral nervous system, they are called as the Schwann cells or satellite cells. So these are all the different type of the cells, and the function of the different type of the cell, just like the astrocytes, they always protect the neurons from the damage and fluid components, etc. So the oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system form myelin sheath in case of the central nervous system, and fewer branches than that of the this astrocytes. So this is taken from the courtesy of McGraw-Hill companies permission with requirement. And so here you can see the microglial cells with a nucleus and oligodendrocytes which is surrounding the nucleus. It's a microglia, then oligodendrocytes. So myelin sheath is an insulating layer around the nerve and formed by oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system and Schwann cells in peripheral nervous system. And this is composed of a lipoprotein with phospholipids, glycolipids, and cholesterol. And myelination is the process of myelin formation. So here you can see the microglia of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So astrocytes are star-shaped, blood-brain barrier, and most numerous in nature. So the astrocytes are the one which are surrounding the case of a capillary endothelial cells and central canal of the spinal cord and epididymal cells can be seen here. Ciliated to help circulate the cerebrospinal fluids. The Schwann cells are the one which surrounds to myelin sheath around peripheral axons look like jelly roll with neurolemma cover, and noda praniver separates each Schwann cells. So here you can see that particular structure. So this is a structure of a entire neuron, and the branched tree-like structures are called as the dendrites, and this one is called as the cell body. Elongated cell body is also called as the axons, and inside this one there are neurofibrils are there, and here you can see the different structures inside the cytoplasm do contain lot of the structures like the cell bodies, then neurofibrils, nucleus, nucleolus, etc. And they also receive the different stimuli from the adjacent neurons. And the which is called as the axon collateral. Then node of Raynaud in between the cells. Then the axon, which is transmitting the impulse from the center of this neuron to the periphery. So the cytoplasm is also called as the exoplasm. So exolemma and neurofibrils are present. Then these are called as the axon terminals and synaptic or end bulb, which is having the junction with that of the effector cells. So inside the cell body, the dendrites are the structures which are having the cell body, neuroglia, axon, etc. So this is having multiple structures, and the Schwann cells are the protective layers to the axon, and also the myelin sheath and neurolemma. And in between these node of Prenivers are present, which are not exposed or covered by the Schwann cells. Then myelin and unmyelinated fibers. Some fibers, neurofibers, are myelinated, some are unmyelinated. So, unmyelinated are the neurilemma cells, unmyelinated axon are present, and here myelinated means external structure is also present. Just like this black structure, it is called as the myelin sheath, and apart from that one, it is called as the neurilemma. So the Schwann's cells cytoplasm is present, and we can see this is the cross section of the axon, and here this structure just 3 micrometer, very small structure. Then nerve conduction velocity is dependent on size and myelination. It is very fast, within a fraction of seconds. It is transmitted. As usual, it's afferent and efferent divisions. So, afferent means the sensory stimuli is carried by the alpha motor neurons to the extrafusal striated muscle fiber. Then also the neurotransmitters which are involved here are not well understood in the afferent type of the systems, whereas the efferent always it is either the acetylcholine or the epinephrine. Then the afferent always do contain alpha fibers and alpha B fibers and almanylated fibers are shown. And the fiber diameter is very less in the initial stage and go on increasing later. Then here you can see the satellites where cells surround the neuron cell bodies within the glia. And here you can see that glial cells do always contain the cell body and axon. Axon. Then this is called as the dorsal root. And here you can see this is present in case of the this spinal cord, and this is called as the dorsal root ganglia. Then neurolemocytes are the one, they are also called as the Schwann cells, and neurofibril nodes, and which are called as the node of Ranvier in between the structure. They are naked structures in which the axon is exposed. So the satellite cells do contain cell body, axon, and dorsal root. So the axon is protected from the posterior root ganglia, dorsal and ventral root ganglia. The nerve structure are only the periphery, but cables we can compare with that of the cable and consist of hundreds to lakhs of myelinated and unmyelinated nerve fibers. So these contain endoneurium, perineurium, and epineurium of the nerve bundle, and the conduction is saltated type that jumps from one node to the another node for very fast propagation of the impulse. So here we can see a spinal nerve with epineurium around the entire nerve, epineurium, and every nerve is supplied by the blood vessel. The red spotted ones are called as the blood vessels or sometimes the empty structure. Then the round, especially the bundle of the nerves, is surrounded by the vesicle. Then the perineurium around individual vesicle is there, perineurium. And the smallest structure in here is the axon. So everything is bundled or packed in a structure known as the nerve. Entire this thing is called as the nerve. And this is the transverse section showing the covering of the spinal nerve. But the structure of a nerve, almost it is very similar to that, except certain smaller variations between the somatic nerve and also the autonomic nerves. When this is the cross structure, the black structures are called as the blood vessels, wherever they are called as the vesicle, then axons, all these are axons, epineurium, then endoneurium and perineurium. Epi means above, neurium, endo means inside, then peri means the surrounding each neurons. So synapse is a junction of either between two neurons or a neuroeffector cell separated by space or synaptic cleft. So synapse means a site where two nerves communicate with each other. Then presynaptic neuron that is conducting information toward the next neuron. And postsynaptic neuron transmits the information away from the synapse. And most synaptic communication is via the chemical messengers like acetylcholine or serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, endorphins, GABA, glycine, glutamate, etc. So these are all the most synaptic communication. Like acetylcholine is the number one neurotransmitter, followed by a serotonin, especially serotonin is in the central nervous system, norepinephrine, both central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Dopamine, most of the time, central nervous system. Endorphin, CNS, GABA, CNS, glycine, central nervous system, and the glutamic acid. So many type of the neurotransmission. The chemical neurotransmissions happens 99%, whereas the electrical neurotransmission only 1% is there. So the chemical neurotransmission is also called as the neurochemical synapse. So the nerve impulse comes from the upper part of the nerves and axon of the neurons is coming. And here all these are called as the synaptic vesicles containing acetylcholine or epinephrine, depending upon the type of the nervous system, whether it's a sympathetic or parasympathetic. And calcium ion channels are always there and make the movement of the calcium inside or the whenever there is a change in the action potential. So voltage regulated calcium channels and synaptic cleft with the junction. And the synaptic vesicles are going to fuse together and exocytosis occurs. So the neurotransmitters which are stored in the vesicles are secreted out. It's also called as the exocytosis. Either it may be an acetylcholine or norepinephrine. They will bind with the respective receptors and the post-synaptic activity it is going to start. So this is happening in 99% of the nerves, whereas the electrical type of the neurotransmission is also happening in certain very specific nerves like the smooth muscles or the presynaptic cells do have a gap junction and local small type of local current will be produced due to the presence of the sodium ions. Then, uh, so the plasma membranes, inner surface or plasma membranes do polarization and depolarization takes place. That's called as the electric synapse synapse, whereas the chemical synapse is like this. So this is always happening in many type of the uh, presynaptic cells of smooth muscle cells. So types of this image: exodendritic, axon to dendrite; exosomatic, axon to cell body; axonic, axon to axon. So this is the types of the synapses. Dendrite with axon is called as the exodendritic synapse, and the exoaxonic means axon with another axon. So exosomatic means an axon having the connection with that of the body of a neuron. So these are all different types of the synapses. Then types of the synapses, lot of type of the synapses. You can see the dendrite, axon hillock, initial segments, myelin sheath, etc. Then types of the neuronal integration. These neurons form many different types of the connections, and doing can result in finite control over the neuronal circuit. So such circuits may produce excitatory postsynaptic potential or inhibitory postsynaptic potential (IPSP or EPSP) and help to modulate the neuronal signals. So this is the neuronal circuits input output a diverging signal. Here all are non-phenomenal, all cells will respond or no cells will respond. Axonal regeneration, see the nerve tracts in the central nervous system are incapable of regeneration and own. There may be hope for stem cells carrying out this process. So usually the body cells have got the regeneration capacity, whereas the cells of the central nervous system or the neurons do not have the regeneration capacity. In the peripheral nervous system, the nerves can regenerate, but it is very, very slow, and regeneration is dependent on these things: amount of the damage, neurolemocyte secretion of nerve growth factor, and the distance from the site of the damage to the end or being the innervated. And regeneration occurs at the rate of 1 to 5 millimeter per day. It's a very slow process. In the peripheral nervous system, once the nerve is damaged, the regeneration is a very slow process, and once the nerves are damaged, it's very difficult for the regeneration capacity. But it takes place very, very slow. Then bipolar neurons having the two types of the poles, neuron multipolar, then unipolar neuron in the center. So these are all these health explanatory photos. Astrocytes, star-shaped cells support neurons from blood-brain barrier. Astrocytes are also blood-brain barrier control the chemical environment. Microglia, little glue structures, spider-like phagocytes, and dispose of the debris, especially inside the brain, inside the central nervous system. And the ependydermal cells are the one which do contain the fluid filled this cavity, which is having brain or spinal cord tissue and circulate cerebrospinal fluid filled with cavity. Then oligodendrocytes are fewer branch cells and produce myelin sheath. So the nerve fibers, the outer coat is called as the myelin sheath and process of oligodendrocyte. Then the Schwann cells always they do have the structure of sensory neurons with Schwann cells are bead-like structures here forming the myelin sheath and they protect the peripheral nervous system. That's about the a brief thing, especially the nervous tissue classification and other thing. And uh, this is in a brief thing. And if you want to have the more details, you can go for the different chapters which are covered under the subheadings of different books. Thanks a lot. Bye.